Social distancing. Plus, right here, housing. This is fun. So this is more a span of mind, like it. Catch everything. I'm doing what you. I still have the same guideline.
Water? There may have been 30 or 40 customers in the store. Usually you go and it's just elbow to elbow. Yeah, this was about 5:30, 6 o'clock. There was everything you needed. They had six. Those buy those 36 rolls of toilet paper. They had one little pallet with six of those 36 rolls on it. So my daughter needed it, so we got it. So we got it for her, and as we're going out, I said something to checkout, and they said they got it. They got toilet paper in yesterday afternoon. It's like 3 or 4 pallets of it.
How's your kiddos?
That quick, it's gone.
They
All kinds of vegetables.
They're getting along.
Cereal aisle was,
That's
it
good.
was all on the lower shelf. You know, usually they have it stacked
I'm
up.
excited. I'm excited for the
About
work
3
too.
shelves.
It's kind of like they get in there and get it done, you know, in the morning, get what they need to get done.
Mine are start crazy too.
I got your text message.
Okay.
Just
I just
just a concern.
there's no sense in it. We don't need it for something like that. We can wait. And if it works out, but we know we're not gonna be back for another month.
You know, the manufacturer in California
Just because we don't need it for
said they
anything
will
else
ship
anywhere.
until the police show them.
Right.
Somebody may misinterpret something, so I just rather be safe.
Right, absolutely.
Look how crazy this all looks.
Thank you. Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Tiffany,
Is that how to read all this? Okay.
is Tiffany coming? You always make it. Never late. Just on time.
I told you.
I know, she's not ever late.
I'll pass it to you. and you can-
I know.
It is 5:30 and I will call the March McCracken County School Board meeting to order. If you guys would please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. At this time, I would need to add an addendum, letter I and J to the agenda tonight. You guys have seen letter I and J, so I need a motion and a second to put item I and J on the meeting for tonight.
Motion made.
Second.
Motion and second, all in favor by aye?
Aye.
Any opposed? I and J are added to the agenda. Next, we have recognition of guests. There are none. Next, we have the previous meeting. Regular meeting was on February 27th. I need a motion and a second to approve those meetings. Minutes.
I'll make the motion.
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor by aye?
Aye.
Any opposed? Minutes are passed. Second meeting is a special meeting on March the 13th. All board members were present. I need a motion and a second to approve those minutes.
Motion made.
I'll second.
A motion and a second. We have the monthly financial report. Mr. Jarnett?
Okay, tonight on the financial report, you all have a copy of that, and I wanted to point out a couple things to you. The first thing, we talk about this every so often about how our grant special revenue fund will run to the negative because, it'll run into the negative because it's a reimbursement basis, process. And so now you'll see that we're 50,000 into the positive on that. You can see that we made a bond payment during the month in the debt service column. And then I wanted to also report to you that we've collected $177,000 in our omitted taxes. So that is from the property taxes that were not on the tax roll initially. And so they're beginning to assess taxes for that and send us our part.
Would you repeat that number again?
Yes.
$177,000.
177.
And that was omitted taxes.
Yes, that's what we have received so far, and that's from what was not assessed properly on the whole property from the PBA office.
Anybody have any questions for Mr. Jarnett? Do I have a motion and a second to approve the monthly financial report?
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
Motion and second. All in favor by aye? Any opposed? Monthly financial report passes. Recognition of personnel actions. All the board members have had time to take a look at that. Board members and boards do not take any kind of action on personnel, but that is on the agenda under number 3. At this time, we're not going to have any reports tonight. We're going to save those till next month. Also, Mr. Carter is going to save his standard number 7 influential leadership standard for next month also. Does any member of the Board of Education have anything that they would like to discuss or any questions? Or Mr. Carter, if you have anything?
I just have, select here in case you all had any questions of anybody that's going on. We have finished up construction on the bus garage, so we're, at that, and I didn't know if you all had any questions with that, but Lone Oak Middle School project is going, it's actually kind of on schedule, despite all the weather that we've had. So I asked Mr. Jackson here in case you all had any questions directly to that, but all the other reports, we can always follow up with you all next month. But again, that was the big projects that are going on.
Mr. Shelby?
I would like, this could be for Mr. Johnny, Mr. Bowman. how are we determining attendance? And how does that apply to our seat funds?
They have yet to answer that question, but the anticipation is they will take our SAR, or
I'm sorry.
adjusted average daily attendance from the SAR report last year.
Okay.
After all home hospital and everything is calculated into that, the final number, in each day that we use for an NTI day, it would be replaced with what our,
Average was on that time last year.
yes.
Okay, thank you.
And the one thing I'll have with that, Mr. Shelby, is the NTI that we're operating under right now is not the standard NTI plan that previous districts had applied for. I mean, this is almost a very separate case specifically to the COVID-19 pandemic that we're dealing with. So we were just on a conference call this morning, getting some more guidance on how this is going to roll forward. So right now, that's the direction we have. We may come back with a different answer next month, but as of today, that's how they're looking at doing all that for next month.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else have anything? All right, we'll move on to the consent agenda. Everyone has had a chance to look at the consent agenda on all 16 items. Does anybody have any questions or items that they would like to discuss or pull out for discussion?
I would like to see about tabling the request for the use of school property, the educational field trips, and the school-wide fundraising request. And Mr. Carter can explain to us, but I just wanted to make sure that we're not approving something that somebody would misconstrue that we're going to let happen when we're not in school.
Yeah, I mean, all of those will be contingent upon us resuming normal business. Again, while our buildings are not quarantined, they're not open for public gatherings. I mean, this meeting is indicative of kind of the steps that we're taking with social distancing. So anything like that would not be permissible under the current state of emergency that we're under. So.
But do you feel it's necessary we leave it on there?
If something were to happen and that we will be able to resume life as prior to March 13th, prior to the next board meeting, it would allow us to go ahead and move forward. But, to table it to April, I think we would be fine as well. So either way, we would be good. But just because you approve it tonight, I will not allow it to occur in our buildings until we resume normal operations.
Is that okay, Ms. Burking?
Yeah.
Mr. Carter, can you make sure that we're up to date on that? And can we just make sure that all entities of these fundraisers, the field trip request and the school property, can we make sure that they are, that you're discussing that with them and making sure that everybody, knows what's going on?
Most definitely.
Thank you. Anybody else have anything on the consent agenda they'd like to speak about? All right, I need a motion and a second to approve the
Motion to
consent
accept
agenda.
the consent agenda.
Second.
Motion and second. All in favor by aye?
Aye.
Any opposed? Consent agenda is passed. Letter B, Section 7, the SBDM allocation for 2020-21 school year. Mr. Jarnett.
Okay, thank you. As we were meeting with principals to review the staffing allocation for next year for Section 5, which is classified staff, it was brought to our attention that the schools are having trouble with having some needs in the summertime and when school is closed for breaks on extra cleaning and some of the deep cleaning. And then, of course, with all this COVID-19 situation coming up, it's even more evident that we need help with some deep cleaning from time to time. So what we have looked at and what we propose is instead of adding positions all throughout the district, what we would like to have approved is to take the cost of one full-time custodian and allocate those hours and that money out among the schools based on enrollment. And in doing so, allow them to hire sub-custodians who could be people who are already employed in the district or people who are not employed in the district. But the sub-custodian rate is a lower rate of pay than a normal custodian or a regular full-time custodian. And then they could have this bank of time that they could apply as needed for extra help in their schools. So that would allow them some flexibility with the schedule. It would allow some deep cleaning, while their custodians are doing things in the summer like waxing floors, using those scrubbers and the heavy equipment that not just everyone is able to do. The chart here, one more thing about that, having sub-custodians added to our list of people who are available to work would also help because we do have a shortage of sub-custodians. So this chart here breaks down the projected enrollment and what percentage of enrollment each school has, and then we've allocated that out by the cost of a full-time custodian. And so if you look at an 8-hour day based on the sub-custodian rate, for example, Concord could have 34 days worth of work. Heath Elementary could have 25, Hendron 24, and so on, all the way up to the high school could have 108 days worth of work for a custodian to sub in the building. So we're asking for approval of this allocation for the 2021 school year.
Anybody have any questions for Mr. Jordan?
I don't have any questions, but is there a problem with them going to the microphone to share their information?
I mean,
Because I don't think that it's picking up.
we'll have record of them. We're trying to eliminate,
Okay.
any with
Okay.
the whole,
Okay, all right. I make a motion to,
Superintendent's recommendation.
Superintendent recommends approving the Section 7 SPDM allocation for the 2021 school year.
We have a motion and a second.
motion made.
Second.
Motion and second. Any discussion? All in favor by aye? Any opposed? Motion is passed. Letter C, approval of bid for sale of surplus fuel tank.
Okay, as part of our construction project for the bus garage and the new Lon Middle School, we have, of course, had to build a new bus garage to make room for Lon Middle School. And part of that project is getting rid of our old, above ground fuel storage tank. It's not something we can reuse because of EPA guidelines. Okay, so because of EPA guidelines, we can't just reuse it and move it over to the new facility. So, we have shut that off and we accepted, or we sought bids for, someone to buy the tank from us and move it off of our property. And we were prepared to open bids on March 18th, but no bids were submitted. So we've done a little research, with Butch's office, and there's a statute, KRS 45A.425, and it says, if no bids are received for surplus property, the property can be disposed of in any manner deemed appropriate by the local public agency. So we have been in contact with some individuals, some farmers, and some businesses, to see if we could find anybody who would just take it for free, just take it off of our property. It would cost us about $1,500 to rent a crane and the trailer plus mileage to have it hauled off, and we would need someplace to put it. So, depending on where it would go, we don't know what the cost would be, but at least $1,500 for equipment. We have found Stinnett Truck Repair and Towing, and they have agreed to take it off of our property for $400, which would cover their labor in doing that. And they can do it on Thursday of this week, which would expedite the process and let us move forward with the Lon Middle construction, with tearing down that, the existing bus garage and all of that. So what we're asking for is permission to pay $400 to Stinnett Truck and Towing to remove the tank and take it off of our property.
You may have any questions for Mr. Jordan? What's the superintendent recommendation?
Superintendent recommends that the board approve the recommended bids and approval of payment for the removal of the gas tank.
Do you have a motion and a second?
I'll make a motion to approve it.
I'll second.
Motion second. All in favor by aye? Any opposed? Motion is passes. Letter D, approval of bid for sale of surplus volleyball equipment.
Okay, we have, 2 volleyball net systems at McCracken County High School that were purchased for the opening of the high school, and those are no longer being used, but they're in good condition. So we asked permission last month to solicit bids to sell that equipment as well. We also opened bids on March 18th that, and we had one bid. It was from Chris Presswood. It was for $1,050 per set for a total of $2,100. And that would include him coming and getting the equipment and removing it. So I'm asking for permission to approve that bid.
Anybody have any questions for Mr. Jarnett? Superintendent's recommendation?
Superintendent recommends that the board approve the recommended bid.
You've heard the superintendent's recommendation. Do I have a motion and a second?
I'll make a motion.
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor by aye?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Letter E, funding approval for continuation of the National Board Certified Teacher Incentive Program.
Yes, tonight I come to you guys and ask for your consideration to continue the National Board Mentoring Program that was started a couple years ago. This board graciously agreed to fund up to 5 National Board Certified teachers who are pursuing National Board Certification, pay for a component of their training. That was in 2016-17. The last 2 years, including this one, we've now had 20 teachers participate, 10 each year, so the program is growing. So I come to you tonight for your consideration to consider refunding that so that we can have more teachers in the 2021 school year, led by Ms. Cole. And upon your approval tonight, we'll get that information out through an application process that we begin applying for the upcoming school year.
Anybody have any questions for Mr. Seglinski?
I have a question. So the continuation is for 5 new ones, like we have done each year. And then
Actually,
we,
been paying up to 10.
then the other 5 were people who were already in the program to continue, is that correct? So that's a total of 10. Okay, thank you.
Superintendent's recommendation?
Superintendent recommends approving continuation of National Board Certified Teacher Incentive Program.
Motion made.
Second.
Motion and second. All in favor by aye?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion is passed. Letter F, McCracken County High School graduation date 2020.
We are proposing tonight a graduation date in hopes that we have some normalcy return back to our daily lives and that social gathering can reoccur. And so with that anticipation and hopes, we are holding our school calendar. Currently, we do not have to amend our school calendar for any reason. So upon consultation with Mr. Hauser, we are requesting that the board set graduation date for May 22nd, 2020 at 7:30 p.m. at Marquette Stadium, weather permitting.
Anybody have any questions for Mr. Boland? Superintendent's recommendation?
Superintendent recommends approving the requested date for high school graduation.
You've heard the superintendent's recommendation. Do I have a motion and a second?
I make a motion.
Second.
Motion and second. All in favor by aye?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion is passed. Letter G, superintendent non-contract days. Mr. Carter.
Initially, in my contract, it requires for the board to approve if I take more than 4 consecutive non-contract days. The original request was going to be for spring break to take 5 days. However, changes of plans have changed with everything else. So that request is not needed at this time. However, as part of that attachment was also the non-contract days that have been used up to this point this year. You all are required to be notified of those. So this is just kind of some house cleaning to get things caught back up. And so moving forward, non-contract days will be part of the superintendent expense report as well from the non-contract days that are used in the previous month. So at this point, there really is no need for approval, but just more of a recognition that the non-contract days that have been utilized, because I will not be taking consecutive days off for spring break.
Anybody have any questions for Mr. Carter? So no action needs to be taken on letter G. So we'll move on to letter H, is the evaluation of superintendent. Mr. Bradley, do you want to go over that? That's
They typically, or annually, the board has approved has to approve an instrument for evaluation of the superintendent. The instrument we've used in the past is the one that was adopted, I think 2014 or 2015. And then, of course, there was a court case that said you can't use that anymore, or said they can't force a board to use a certain instrument. This is the same instrument we've used for the past 5 or 6 years. We have to adopt that instrument every year. This is the first step in the superintendent evaluation process. Once this is adopted, then the board can start the process of the evaluation. Of course, the formative portion of the evaluation, those are done in closed session, where the board actually meets with the superintendent to review his progress and to suggest improvement and suggest goals in the future. The final summative evaluation will be adopted. We typically adopt that either in June or July. And this again just starts that process. And that's probably the same evaluation instrument you've used, that they used for the superintendent in your previous positions, right?
Right, and this is the same, if you remember the training that we had in December, the SPGES, it's that same instrument that we discussed that evening as well.
And it goes along with the superintendent's report. He reports to you monthly. And of course, we didn't do that the one tonight, but, and it sort of gives you a template of what he's done throughout the year.
Anybody have any questions for Mr. Bradley? It is the board prerogative. Do I have a motion and a second to approve the evaluation of superintendent,
Evaluation instrument.
evaluation instrument?
I'll make
make
a motion to approve that.
Second.
Motion and second. All in favor by aye? Any opposed? Motion is passed. Move on to letter I, which is the resolution of Crown County School Board regarding meeting protocols for novel coronavirus, COVID-19. You guys had received that addendum, and I think you guys have a copy of that in front of you. Mr. Carter, is there anything you want to highlight on
Yeah,
on
this was a resolution that was sent out by KSBA, and we just kind of made it specific for McCracken County. And this is only for the period that we're dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic. And it allows for us to conduct, virtual type meetings like this, moving forward if we need to. So again, this resolution just kind of lays out the process that we would follow and the guidelines for conducting such meetings in the future if necessary. But it is very specific to this event. So
And
once the COVID-19 state of emergency is lifted, this resolution would not allow us to have these type of meetings under this guidelines.
May I say something? The situation is all board meetings have to be open to the public. However, because of the state of emergency we're in, the Department of Education asked for a ruling from the Attorney General, an opinion from the Attorney General. Could we have a meeting where the public could only just watch but not attend? And reason for not attending is because of the governor's guidelines on public gatherings. The Attorney General issued an opinion that we could adopt this process for this situation only. It's not, so as soon as this emergency situation is over, then we go back to our public meetings where the press is here, the public, anyone can be here. But in order to allow the public to watch, then we can do what we're doing, like what we're doing tonight. In the future, there'll be no public allowed into the meeting. The press can watch, the press can, so we could actually do the meeting. We wouldn't even have to be together. We could all do it from our laptops, okay? And this just gives you the discretion to do that. And I think that's, and it'll come out in the public notice the next time we, for notice for our next meeting, we'll just say it's going to be according to this resolution. Okay?
Yes, sir. Anybody have any questions for Mr. Carter or Mr. Bradley?
I just would like to say that it needs to make accommodations where the public can hear what they are saying when they report to us. I don't know that they're hearing it that well. So if we do that, whether it's, if we meet from our homes via whatever platform we use, I think it's important for the public to hear what they're reporting, because that's the information we're
Right.
making decisions on.
And
So-
they couldn't do it tonight
We-
because we hadn't
yeah.
hadn't adopted the
Right,
resolution.
right. I'm just saying for
Yeah.
future ones, yeah.
If we use this, everybody would have their own device, so they're in their own microphone, so that would be, that'd be easily accommodated.
Good deal.
Anybody else have anything? Mr. Carter, what's the superintendent's recommendation?
Superintendent recommends adoption of the resolution.
You've heard the superintendent's recommendation. Do I have a motion and a second?
Motion made.
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor by aye? Any opposed? Letter I is passed. Letter J, approval of receipt of $1.96 million in 21st Century Continuation Grant Funding. Ms. Genevieve.
So back in November, 4 of our schools applied for 21st century funding. We have the high school, Heath Elementary, Hendron, Lone Oak, and Reedland Intermediate, and we found out this last week. Time's been strange lately. All 4 of them got it. So that means that the programs at the high school, Hendron and Reedland, will continue. And Heath Elementary will get their program back. So they haven't, this is their second year without the program, so they'll get to restart that next year. And that's, like Chris said, I keep trying to touch my face and stopping myself. 1.96 million over 5 years. So that'll provide tutoring, clubs, homework help, it'll pay for staff, it'll, Sarah Jane works with the program to provide meals through the food service. It's a really great program. Pretty excited.
Anybody have any questions for Genevieve? Thank you, Genevieve. Thank you for your hard work and
Yes.
dedication and what you do every single day. It's amazing.
It's incredible.
Incredible. You do a great job.
What's the superintendent's recommendation?
Before I make my recommendation, I just want to say, I knew something good had happened because I heard this loud noise down the hallway before Genevieve came down and shared the news that we got that. So it's with great pleasure that I recommend that the board approve the receipt of $1.96 million for 21st Century Continuation Grant Funding.
You've heard the superintendent's recommendation. Do I have a motion and a second?
I make the motion.
Second.
Motion and second. All in favor by aye? Any opposed? Motion is passed. Need a motion and a second for orders of the treasurer.
I make a motion, we approve the orders of the treasurer.
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor by aye?
Uh,
Any opposed? Orders of the treasurer passed. We do have executive session tonight.
I'd like to recommend that the board go into executive session to discuss the following business for the following reasons and under the following exceptions to KRS 61.810. To hear a report from the attorney for the board on pending and proposed litigation pursuant to KRS 61.810, Section 1, subsection C, because the discussion in open session would be a waiver of the attorney-client privilege and have an adverse effect on said litigation.
Do I have a motion and a second to go into executive session?
I make a motion.
Second?
Motion and second. All in favor by aye? Any opposed? We are in executive session.
Go to the teacher workroom because we got plenty of room to spread out.